My name's Dewe Matthews. I'm a photographer, video maker, artist, and I often make work about people's relationship to landscape, how we project memory onto landscape, how we read into landscape, often just trying to tell stories really through the places around us. London River Burning is a video piece. I shot a series of areas of the surface of the river as the dusk transitions into night time, so natural light into artificial light of the city, and overlaid a voice track, an interview I did with Philip Robinson.
The baptism arise and washing away of the sins, and it's not so much for me that, it's a memory, but the immersion into the water and coming out as a believer.
So Philip was incredibly lucky to survive the Marchioness disaster, which was when a pleasure boat crashed on the Thames one evening in 1989, and many young people died. He survived that catastrophe. The trauma, obviously, that existed is something that he's had to deal with throughout his life. But he talks about that moment of immersion, the forced immersion, as almost like a baptism, as a moment where he came up and realised his faith.
A forced, tragic immersion in many ways.
I think making work is often, for me, quite a isolated experience anyway. You know, I'm by myself, trudging up and down the Thames, or, you know, as I was in this piece, spending time along the bridges of the Thames. And, you know, whether it's at night or during the day, there is something it's quite meditative. You're looking, you're thinking. But in this case, working exclusively at night, you know, there's a lot of waiting, thinking, checking, but also watching other things going on. It's always that thing of as soon as you stop, you start to notice. When you move, you don't actually see anything, so you have to stop. I did experience one thing that has really stayed with me, which was an attempted suicide. Something you hear about but you never really expect to experience. And I saw a woman who was trying to jump off the bridge. She was with a man who was trying to restrain her. And so me and another passerby had to run in and try and help pull her off. And it was a very intense and stressful thing to witness. I think an atmosphere or a mood changes in the night, and some things maybe become possible or become options, but it really shifted the way that I felt about making the work that I was making at that time as well. That staring into the water, you're looking into the water, what does it represent? What does is it freeing? Is it beautiful? Is it dreadful? I don't think of myself as visibly a vulnerable female. Whether that's true or not, who's to say? But you know, that's not what I imagine what I seem like. Those nights there in the cold, rain coming in and then waiting and then trudging around with the tripod and the camera, there's a kind of mundanity about it, but there's also a real moments of joy and interest, you know, that happen within that. Moments of beauty, looking at the city at night and admiring the gloriousness, you know, that we've created as humankind, but then equally this horrible glass, you know, jungle that is kind of fast homogenising, and so it's such a mixture of feelings when you're shooting, but I think your mind is allowed to wander, which is nice.
My name's Melanie King, and I'm an artist who works with photography and astronomy. I became interested in astronomy when I was a really little child. I used to be really scared of thinking about vast things like space, like the size of galaxies and the sun, and I couldn't quite get my head around it, so I stopped thinking about it for about 10 years. And then when I started doing my art education, I thought it would be good to focus on what scares me. So the fear became a fascination in the end. And I haven't really stopped thinking about it for about 8 years, or 10 years even. So my most recent project is called Ancient Light, and it's a photographic project where I go into dark landscapes and take pictures of the stars on an analogue camera. So the idea behind that is I want to capture light that has been travelling thousands, if not millions of years, onto photosensitive film. And then I work with that in the dark room, using the negatives, which I feel are as precious as something like a fossil or a meteorite, because to me they represent something like an incomprehensible amount of time in a material object. So I go out and I take my different kinds of cameras, usually analog, 35mm 120, and I'll take a shutter release and load my film up with really high sensitivity film. It's quite an amazing experience to be alone in the darkness looking at the stars like that. I think that women currently feel a lot less comfortable than men going outside at night, and that is rooted in fear of things like rape and death. In one of Rebecca Solnit's books, Wanderlust, she says that women have only really felt comfortable going outside at night since the 20th century, which is quite important if you think about that, and what that means about historical treatments of women. Lumen Studios, which is a collective I run about astronomy and light with 2 other women, and we have a lot of people coming on our residencies and trips, and 80% of those people are female usually. I think it's because it provides a safe space for women to go out and view the stars. A lot of my work over the past couple of years has been trying to communicate how special life is in the entirety of time and space. So thinking about how long humanity has existed within the great timeline of the universe. We've only existed for a second, and we're at a point now where life on Earth is under threat from ecological problems. I think it's quite important to photograph the moon and the stars and planets from London, as well as showing people that they can see the moon and the stars through a telescope. Kind of gives you a different perception of London. We think that it might not be possible to kind of see these kind of objects from a polluted city, but it's really possible. I sometimes fantasize about what London would be like if we turned all the lights off, whether we'd be able to see the stars and what that would look like. And would all the stars be reflected in the glass buildings, or would, I don't know.
My name's Maria de Paula Vasquez. I'm really into documentary and street photography, in particular photographing graffiti, street art. I've done quite a bit of gig photography as well as photographing burlesque performances, sort of the before, the during, and the after. So yeah, and it's 95% shot on film, color and black and white. Something about the night just, it draws me in. I feel anonymous, which is where I'm most comfortable. I feel more free. But if I'm out photographing at night, I want to be aware. I try to look inconspicuous. In the daytime, you're pretty much guaranteed you're gonna get a good shot. Whereas at night, fingers crossed. There's going to be a bit of available light when I find something that catches my eye. I'll look at the contact sheet later and be like, that is a dope shot, so I'm going to print it. I am drawn to the concrete jungle, like New York, London, Sao Paulo. I can see the beauty in like dirty places and dirty things. I'm always interested in seeing what the other half, like, that isn't represented, that you see in everyday media, is doing. So yeah, so like obviously in burlesque, it's still a field quite dominated by like white women, and it was always great seeing more like, oh wow, like Black women doing it. When I get an opportunity to like go backstage and stuff, you know, you see everybody like as their, you know, regular daytime selves, and then, you know, they put on the makeup, you know, the tassels, the corsets, and then get on stage and they're a completely different person, completely different persona. And then it's like 3 minutes of that, and then they're back, you know, backstage again, taking off the layers, and then going back into the night as their normal self.
Going out to take photographs of the stars gives me a bit of perspective on life. It makes my problems seem trivial.
You have to take risks. You have to find ways to make your work.